Today we're talking about the Canon R7. Specifically, who is this camera for? Should you upgrade or should you get this as your second camera and so forth? And at the same time, I'll also share some of my experience, things I like, things I don't like about the camera and all of that stuff. So let's start with the design and the ergonomics of the camera itself. The most noticeable design change here is the dial as well as the joystick. Everything's up here right beside your thumb. Now at first I thought I wouldn't get used to it, but right away I got really used to the dial and the joystick. I almost never use the directional pad anymore to maneuver around menus, and instead I have assigned shortcut buttons for it. For example, if I want to do burst mode right away, I can just like toggle left and start shooting in burst without having to go into the menu or even the quick menu to adjust for that. And that is pretty much the only thing I use for, like 4 extra shortcuts that I can use. Another design that I like is the off and on button. Right now the on serves for photo, and to the left it's for movie, which is for video. And with a single switch you can switch between modes right away really quickly. You also get dual SD cards if you want to shoot with backup or you like to shoot with like smaller SD cards. There are tons of ways that you can use with dual SD cards according to your shooting style. The next thing I want to mention is the mic placement. Right now it's all the way on top and it's only by itself at this corner, which means whenever I need to attach an external microphone, all I need to do is to open one slot. Instead of like before, whenever I open one up, it's like mic jack and as well as headphone jack. The headphone jack is moved to down here all the way down, and the placement of these two fits perfectly because whenever I flip out the flippy screen, like it does not cover the rotation of the flip out screen. The details in design is just phenomenal over here, and personally I really dig this kind of design. And as usual, the Canon R7 does not have a full-size HDMI port. This feels kind of like Apple and their lightning cable, where they just insist on not putting in a full-size HDMI port for some reason. Even though I feel like there's plenty of space here, like why not? However, the Canon R7 does have the shutter blade design to cover its sensor, and I believe all of the mirrorless camera has this design, except the R10 for some reason. And this feels more like a marketing gimmick that Canon is trying to play. Basically, you have to pay more for a more premium feature on your camera. And I guess to a certain degree that does make sense. Now let's briefly talk about the autofocus on the Canon R7 here. It has the same DigX image processor from the R3, which is almost 5 times more the cost. And it does not disappoint. The autofocus is very sticky. You have points from edge to edge of the frame. Most of the time it'll pick up whatever subject you're trying to focus. This could be a person, animal, or a vehicle. Sometimes using the autofocus like this now feels kind of like cheating. This is way more capable. It almost feels like I'm getting spoiled. And that's how good it is. As for photos, 32 megapixel is plenty enough. There's also this pre-shooting raw burst mode where once you have pressed the shutter, it'll start record the photo like about half second before. And I find this especially useful if you're sporting events of some sort, and as well as sometimes for street photography if you are into a burst mode kind of shooting style for street photography. Personally, I don't use burst mode for street photography, but if you do, this will be a really great tool to have. And on top of that, you can shoot 30 frames per second for electronic shutter, and I believe 15 for mechanical. And no matter how many frames your camera can capture per second, it's still no use if you don't know when to press the shutter. Because from my experience with the electronic shutter, the buffer is around like 60, 65-ish. As for mechanical, the buffer is around like 100. So if you press it too early, you won't be able to capture the shot. Even though you have like 60 to hundreds of photos before the actual action, still no use if you don't have the right decisive moment captured. So it's not just where you can press the shutter and just hold it until however many seconds it gets. You have to wait for the buffer to be finished in order to take the next burst of shots. By the way, the Canon R7 has compressed RAW, which is half the file size compared to a regular RAW photo, where at the same time it retains almost all of the image quality in the photo. It's really hard to tell the difference between compressed RAW and the regular RAW unless you zoom in really closely and try to dig for the differences between details. And honestly, for most users, it's really not that visible. You still have enough highlights and shadows to play around with in post. And with the dual SD slots on the Canon R7, you can definitely use this as a backup file if you want, either shooting RAW in one and C-RAW in the other, or just C-RAW on one and medium JPEG, for example, on the other card. You can set this up really easily in the wrench menu, and then choose which card you want to shoot with in the quick menu. So, video, there's no record limit, great, and it shoots 10-bit in this APS-C camera at this price range. I think that's fantastic. And you can also shoot C-Log on the Canon R7, which is easy to grade with great dynamic range. And I do have a couple gripes on this camera as of now. See, I updated the firmware to 1.1 and the playback is still delayed. Like I mentioned in my earlier videos on the R7, whenever I play the playback, there's this like delay and it's just really annoying. But after the firmware, the delay is still there, so hopefully maybe 1.2 firmware update, this will fix that. But as of now, the delay stays. Most of the good lens, I suppose, right now is the RF version, and they're usually designed for full frame cameras. Although some of the good ones I like right now is the 50 nifty, because on the crop sensor is almost like 85, which makes it a great portrait using the Canon R7 with this kind of combo. However, it feels like Canon is very dedicated to their mirrorless lineup right now, so we shouldn't have to wait too long for more and new RFS lenses. So that leads to the biggest question: who should upgrade to the R7, or who should get the R7? If you have a full frame camera right now, like the R5 or the R6, then the R7 could be a very good B cam for either videos or whenever you need to have an extra reach, because it has that 1.6 crop factor. On top of that, it has built-in image stabilizer and it only costs $14.99. I feel like if you've been using the 70 Mark II or even the 90D series, it's a great upgrade from those cameras. And the R7 is a great way for you to get a feel of how the mirrorless camera feels like. Even though honestly, if you know how to use the DSLR, the mirrorless is a lot easier to shoot with nowadays. You get incredible autofocus system on the R7, like incredibly good. And if you're into video, the Canon R7 also shoots in C-Log 3 as well, where it gives you great dynamic range. And for anyone who's just starting out and wants to be a very serious enthusiast in either the photo or the videography world, the Canon R7 will last you a long time, and it's a great tool to have and practice with. Now, if you're someone who's like a total beginner who has no idea about any photography or videography, any of that sort, the Canon R10 would be the best choice in my opinion. Even though you don't get to have some of the premium features it has on the R7, Canon mirrorless APS-C camera right now does lack a lot of dedicated lens. But I'm really looking forward to third-party manufacturers such as Sigma and maybe Tamron as well to make more RF and RFS lenses. This way, Canon mirrorless camera users will have more varieties of lenses to choose from. If you're into shooting wildlife or sports, then the R7 is totally for you. If you rarely or don't shoot sports or wildlife, then maybe consider any of the full frame as of now. Even though some of the functions on there are a bit outdated, I'll probably wait for a couple months to see, or even beginning of next year if you can wait to see if there's an updated version of Canon EOS R. Honestly, the only downside to the R7 right now is lack of dedicated lenses, and that's it. You can definitely use all the other lenses like the RF ones and pair it up with the R7. Especially since it's an APS-C sensor, you get extra crop, meaning you get extra reach for any kind of lens that you use. So it's phenomenal for wildlife photography or even macro photography. You can have extra depth of field and reach for macro photography if you're into that. But as of now, it is what it is. There's only 2 RF lenses to choose from dedicated for the APS-C sensor cameras. But other than that, the price range $14.99 for the R7 with all of these features packed inside this camera is more than capable. And I'm pretty sure whether you are a beginner or a serious enthusiast, you will not be disappointed with the Canon R7. With that being said, if you liked today's video about the R7, definitely check out this video next. Until then, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.